Welcome to the Every Student Succeeds Act per Pupil Expenditures Reporting Application webinar for the 22-23 reporting cycle. And it's being posted today, January 23rd, 2024. A few reminders as we get started. I believe everybody's already muted. And during the webinar, please use the Q&A function in order to ask questions, and myself, as well as two of our staff members, Ginny Wang and John Miles, will be available to help respond to those questions. Following the webinar, please send any questions to essa.ppe@cde.ca.gov. We also have a helpful website. It's the CDE ESSA per Pupil Expenditure Reporting webpage, and that's located at www.cde.ca.gov/FG/AC/ES/ for additional resources and tools. And the slides, as well as the video of this presentation, will be posted soon on that website as well. So I'm going to provide a little bit of background into the ESSA PPE reporting before I go into the requirement itself. So the law specific to per pupil expenditures for state report cards is specified in U.S. Government Code Section 1111 H1CX. And the minimum requirements for the annual state report card include per pupil expenditures of federal, state, and local funds, which include actual personnel expenditures and non-personnel expenditures disaggregated by source for each local education agency and each school in the state for the preceding fiscal year. And in addition, the state education agency ensures that each local education agency collects the appropriate data and includes the local education agency's annual report of the information that I described earlier, disaggregated in the same manner as required, except for Clause 7 of such a paragraph as applied to the local education agency and each school served by the local education agency. Completing the ESSA PPE report card, completing ESSA PPE reporting is how we as the state of California fulfill these federal requirements. There is additional non-regulatory guidance from the Department of Education that's provided on their website, which is linked here, www.ed.gov/policy/ELSEC/ledge/ESSA/report card guidance final PDF. CDE also issued a letter on August 1st, 2018, which is available on our website at the website I explained earlier. And that goes through additional requirements for this reporting process. So the ESSA PPE calculation contains two calculations, actually. The first is the calculation of school level expenditures. And that is completed by taking the school level expenditures from federal and state and local sources and combining that with the school's share of the central level expenditures from the federal, state, and local sources, all divided by the student count. And you'll note that the, excuse me. And you'll note that this is the first part of the calculation, and we do perform two calculations in this. The second is the LEA level expenditures, which is the total included expenditures. So all the federal, state, and local expenditures divided by the student count. So there are two. There's the school level as well as the LEA or district level expenditures. We receive a lot of questions regarding which expenditures should be included and which should be excluded in the ESSA PPE reporting. The required included expenditures include actual personnel and non-personnel expenditures of federal, state, and local funds disaggregated by source. There are a variety of activities that should be included, and these include, but are not limited to, instruction, instructional and student support services, school and general administration, plant operations and maintenance, school transportation, food services, and enterprise operations. Some of these expenses can be allocated to a school, and some are more appropriately allocated towards the administrative expenditures, which I will explain further. Some of the excluded expenditures that should not be included in the ESSA PPE reporting are expenditures that don't meet the definition of K-12 current expenditures, things along the lines of debt service, capital outlay, community services, adult education, any payments to private schools or other LEAs, payments to charter schools outside of the LEA, and county services to districts. So getting back to the school level versus the central expenditures. School level reporting contains the actual personnel and non-personnel expenditures that can be identified to a specific school site. We're talking here about teacher salaries and benefits, site discretionary non-personnel expenditures, any expenditure that can be specifically tied to the school itself. Then the central level reporting looks at things on a broader scale. So we're talking about personnel and non-personnel expenditures that could not be identified to a particular school site. For example, superintendent costs, pupil transportation, food services, plant operations and maintenance if it cannot be tied to a specific school site, instructional and student support services that cannot be tied to the school site, as well as general administration. So the superintendent's office, board services, fiscal services. There is an expectation that all schools, whether they are a single school district or not, will include some central level reporting. The central level expenditures can be allocated to each school site based upon the metrics that your LEA deems most appropriate for the type of expenditure. And we see methodologies vary, and that's acceptable. But some of the examples include looking at the number of students served by a school to determine how to allocate the superintendent's salary, the percentage of time allocated by LEA personnel to each school. So for staff members that serve multiple schools, such as a speech therapist or a nurse, or square footage, which is often used for utility costs and other plant costs. This year, as with last year, to maintain consistency with the ESSA PPE reporting, we're requiring that the cumulative enrollment figures be utilized for ESSA PPE reporting. Many LEAs in the past have used other data sources, such as CalPADS data, but moving forward, we are requesting that LEAs use the cumulative enrollment figures. The ESSA PPE application currently displays last year's cumulative enrollment figures. This year's cumulative enrollment data is located on our website at cde.ca.gov/ds/ad/files enrcum.asp. We realize that the numbers shown here in the cumulative file are very different from CalPADS, but we request that for the purpose of continuity, that all LEAs use cumulative enrollment in their calculations. Here's some information about the kinds of elements that are reported and what they look like for different schools. So at the top, we've listed the school level expenditures broken down by federal, state, and level, and the school level totals for school A and school B. As you can see, the amounts are different, but they're still allocated at the federal, state and local, and the school level totals. Then we look at the school share of the central expenditures. And these are also divided out in the methodology that the LEA finds most appropriate. And here we've listed the federal and state and local, as well as the school share of the central total. And then we take the school's total expenditures and divide that by the student count. And that is how we ascertain the per pupil amounts. The PPE data is reported as part of the Local Educational Agency Accountability Report Card, the LARC, which is available on our website. We do have a good question that's popped up in our question and answer, which I'll respond to now. We were asked if the ESSA platform will be refreshed to the current cumulative enrollment, not last year's. We have currently begun to discuss that with our TSD, but we are not anticipating an update at this time. Please use the cumulative enrollment file that is available on our website. The ESSA PPE data is collected through our web application. And the CDE provided access codes to the superintendent and chief business official for each LEA and to the administrator for each direct funded charter school listed in the California School Directory. If your LEA has not received a code, please reach out to our ESSA PPE email address and we will provide you with the code. Please also ensure that your LEA's information in the California School Directory is correct so that we can ensure that we send out the codes to the appropriate people next year. The amounts can be hand keyed or prepared in an Excel and imported into the website in a CSV format. A few common issues with the reporting that we noticed in the past year. So for enrollment, we sometimes saw an incorrect data source used. That's very important that we all use the cumulative data enrollment file that I explained earlier. We have also seen school level and central level per pupil amounts that have been entered as a total amount rather than a per pupil amount. While we would love to spend millions of dollars per child in the ESSA PPE reporting, that is not what should be reported, and we have seen that. We have also seen LEA, federal, and state and local per pupil amounts entered as total amounts, so millions of dollars per student, as opposed to a per pupil amount. Finally, for the excluded expenditures, there is an expectation that some expenditures will be excluded. And sometimes we've seen no amount entered for that or a zero, or we see a per pupil amount entered, like $100, for example, being an excluded expenditure for a district with millions of dollars in expenditures. And that would be a cause for a question. So here I'm going to go through the characteristics of a quality submission. I have wiped out the names of the schools so that you, well, in this case, they did well, so I won't, it doesn't matter quite so much, but these are the characteristics of a quality submission. You can see that they entered appropriate amounts for the school expenditures, so the federal plus state and local, as well as the central. And then their total expenditures are an appropriate amount. So we're not seeing millions of dollars entered in the total expenditures per pupil. We are seeing an appropriate amount listed for central as well as school expenditures. And we're also seeing the excluded expenditures being a cumulative total as opposed to a per pupil amount. Okay, so we did receive a question asking, would the amount being entered for excluded amounts be a total amount or per pupil? The excluded expenditures are a total. They are not a per pupil amount. We'll take a look here now at a few where some errors have been made in some data that has already actually been submitted for this year. So the first, I'm going to take you a minute. What's wrong with this submission? If you noted that the per pupil expenditures were not aggregated out on a per pupil basis, you are correct. Yes, millions of dollars. So you have $4 million per student. I would love to have $4 million per student for school expenditures, but that's not going to happen. Otherwise, if we look at the excluded, that seems about right, and that was done correctly. And then down here on the LEA level expenditures, the federal per pupil and the state and local per pupil also seems like it was calculated in an appropriate manner. So we're really just looking at the top with the school expenditures per pupil, the central expenditures per pupil, and the total per pupil. They don't add up. Let's take a look at another one. What's wrong with this submission? I'll give you a minute. Okay, so the school expenditures per pupil seem artificially low. And considering that teacher salaries are included in the school expenditures per pupil, as well as various other costs, $446 per pupil does not seem to be an appropriate calculation. And this is the sort of calculation where we would probably reach out to the LEA to ascertain, are you really only spending $446 per student at the school site level, especially if you're spending $15,000 per student at the central office? It would be cause for some questions. I do have a final one. What's wrong with this one? So it appears here that the excluded expenditures are per pupil, with $387 in excluded expenditures, especially considering the list of expenditures that are to be excluded. We would question this and verify with the LEA that they are only excluding $387 total from their LEA's ESSA PPE calculation. Otherwise, looking at their school expenditures per pupil and their central per pupil and their totals, those look on par. Those look about correct, as well as the LEA level expenditures per pupil. It's really those excluded expenditures that make us pause to question what could be going on with this in this situation. So we do have a few frequently asked questions that I think will address some of the questions that have come up in the chat. So one question that we often get is about our youngest students, our preschoolers. Do we include them in them and any expenditures in the Child Development Fund in this reporting? And because we don't collect enrollment for preschool and child development activities, the LEA has the flexibility to either include or exclude these funds expenditures from their calculations. Another question we often get regards cafeteria expenditures because the reimbursement comes in under one resource code for federal versus state and local. And in this situation, we recommend that the expenditures be accounted as local expenditures, so it's accounted for at the local level. Frequently asked questions, do we include special education expenditures? If so, would we include all funding sources? And yes, our special education students are K through 12 students, so we would include all the expenditures from all funding sources in the per pupil expenditure calculation. Another question that I wanted to address regards STRS on behalf. Since these are paid by the state, are these included? And the answer is no, because these are not LEA costs. These are costs that are borne by the state directly. Other questions we get, do we include funds 14 through 40? We include everything. However, the LEA needs to exclude expenditures in categories that are suggested for exclusion. And the final question, there is still some CARES Act funding floating around, and is that included? And yes, it's included, since the expenditures are part of the day-to-day operations of the school. However, if there are expenditures made from the CARES Act funds that are suggested for exclusion, then we would, of course, exclude them. So please email any additional expenditure requirement questions regarding ESSA PPE to our email address at essappe@cde.ca.gov. And I'm going to go through a few of the questions that have popped up in the Q&A box. So we do have some questions regarding the cumulative enrollment file. Some are having trouble downloading that. And we suggest, as opposed to viewing it in the web browser, that it be downloaded, and then you should be able to access that file. Another question that we received is, I'm new to the position and will be submitting the report for the first time. Welcome. Is there a place within the reporting tool that stores historical reports submitted by my district? So previous reports can be found in your LEAs at LARC, your local agency report card. If you also reach out to us at the ESSA PPE email address, we may be able to give you access to prior year's reporting. Another question, so the numbers that are in there now are the cumulative numbers for 22-23. If so, are we able to use those numbers? No, the numbers in there are the prior year's numbers. They are 21-22. Please use the numbers that are on the cumulative enrollment website, which I provided earlier. Other questions, do we include one-time COVID-19 stimulus funds, expenditures, or other one-time funds? Absolutely. You include everything, except for expenditures that are made in the excluded categories. Okay. And I think I've gone through most of the questions. If you have specific questions about the cumulative enrollment data, I know there is an email address on their webpage, and you can reach out to the data team to inquire for more information about that file and the data sources therein. And now John Miles is going to be providing us with an update on the SLFS survey.
Great. Thank you, Hillary. Before I get started, there's a couple people with their hands up. So Diane, I'm gonna allow you to talk. So you may have a question, and we'll see if we can get to it real quick. Are you there, Diane? Okay. Roxanne, did you have a question?
No, I clicked that by mistake. Sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. All right, so I'll go ahead and get started. Hillary, if you can go to the next slide, please. Great, thank you. So the school level finance survey. So a little bit of information about this. All LEAs will be receiving a letter from the CDE here shortly, kind of going through what this requirement is, what the requirements are, and the data collection timeline. So since most of you who are doing the ESSA PPE calculation will most likely also will be doing the SLFS calculation, I thought now would be a good time to just kind of give you kind of an idea of what's happening. So a little bit more about the SLFS. This is something that's been happening nationally for a while. It's been collected, but more on a voluntary basis. So about 18 states provide this information annually to the U.S. Department of Education. It wasn't until May of last year that it was approved that it become mandatory for all states to provide this information. And this information is going to be part of the civil rights data collection that the U.S. Department of Ed takes care of. So in this time, we've kind of have had some conversations with the U.S. Department of Ed on a timeline for California to complete this requirement. So the requirement really started, the mandatory part of the requirement really started with the 21-22 fiscal year using that data. And what California did is we provided the feds with the ESSA PPE information to satisfy the requirement. And we're going to do the same for the 22-23 year. So for this fiscal year that you're completing for the ESSA PPE, that's also satisfying the SLFS. But next year, when you do it for these current year expenditures, there's going to be a little bit more of a calculation that you're going to need to do. And that's kind of what I want to go over today. So Hillary, if you can go to the next slide, please. So this is the, kind of the specific area where the code is kind of laid out regarding the SLFS. There's the Department of Education Organization Act, which I believe kind of began back in the 1970s. And so they've been kind of using this where the Office for Civil Rights can collect this information. And then back in April and May of last year is where they said, go ahead and collect the SLFS as part of that. As part of that collection. If you can go to the next slide, please, Hillary. So here is the data collection timeline. So 21-22 fiscal year, obviously that collection's already passed and we provided the ESSA PPE. And then for this year, we're also going to use the ESSA PPE. So for the 23-24 year, we are going to use the NCES. We need to provide the information for NCES function 1000, which is the instruction. So NCES is the National Center for Education Statistics. And that they provide the federal accounting school manual, and our CSAM, the California School Accounting Manual, is primarily based on the NCES manual. So there are kind of our partners when it comes to accounting issues with how we apply those to schools. And so they have their, as how SACS is laid out, there's a fund code, a function, a resource. The NCES is primarily built the same way, the account code structure. So our agreement with the Department of Ed is that for the 23-24 year, we will collect the instruction data from LEAs. And then in the 24-25 year, we'll need to include 4 functions plus 3 exhibits. And so you can see the different functions there and the different exhibits there that we're going to need to collect. Now I'll say this also, the actual SLFS includes more than what you're seeing here. So, through 24 and 25 and beyond, this is what we are required to provide. The actual SLFS collection, does include almost all of the functions that you see in CSAM. The SLFS has the capability of asking us for that. But right now, Department of Ed is just asking us for these functions and these 3 exhibits. We can go next slide, please. So what do we want to do here? So we're going to have school level expenditures and central level expenditures. The calculation, the expenditures that you're going to include are exactly the same that what you're doing with the ESSA PPE calculation. Chances are you already have this information anyhow. What are we excluding? Pretty much the only thing you're going to exclude from the SLFS is adult education, because we're only looking at this at a function level. And if you recall from Hillary's presentation with the ESSA PPE, when you looked at all of the different exclusions, it was excluding certain functions. Well, those functions aren't required in this. So, but we do want to exclude Fund 11. So that's going to be your main exclusion in all of this. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at what the fiscal year 23-24 reporting period will look like. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So we're going to look at the NCES function 1000. So let's crosswalk that to what that looks like in SACS. So for SACS, what you're going to look at is each of these function codes. So function 1000, 1110, 1120, 1130, and 1190. And essentially what we're going to need is just the total of that. Now, this is going to be a little different because ESSA PPE, we're asking for a per pupil amount. But with the SLFS, we're just asking for the total. That's all it is. So you probably already have that within your spreadsheets. We'll need the total. It'll also be by school level. And if you go to the next slide, please. So this is kind of how the calculation would work. Chances are is most of it, when you're doing your ESSA PPE, these functions are already going to be included in your school level. However, you may have some central level, function 1000 that are part of your central level calculation, because maybe a teacher isn't just solely going to one school site and is going to multiple school sites. So you'd want to include those into your total. So this is just a slide that's just showing just strictly for NCS function 1000. And if you were to go to the next slide, you're going to see what it would look like if it was just using SACs. So we can kind of see what that is there. If we go to the next slide, please, we're going to see what 24-25 is going to look like and beyond. So just remember, for 23-24, we just need those function 1000 data, and we're going to need it for the fiscal year 22-23, the year we're currently in, 23-24, sorry. So what happens in during the reporting period of 24-25, this is what we're going to need. It's definitely going to be much more information, but I think it's information that everybody has already. It's just being able to group this in a total amount by school. So instruction 1000, which you'll have, then we'll have student support service function 20, NCS function 2100, but you can see what the crosswalk would include for SACs. Then the next slide would show you, get the next slide, please, Hillary. And then you'll see instructional staff support, and then also school administration. So these are going to be the 4 NCES functions that we'll need to get. We go to the next slide, you'll see the exhibits that we'll need. So the exhibits that they're looking for are salaries that are paid just to teachers. So we're going to use, so obviously we would use SACS object code 1100, certificated teacher salaries, and we would use that within all of the NCS function 1000 areas. And then another one, our next one would be their salaries that are paid to instructional staff or assistants, which would include the 3 SACS functions there. And then finally, the books and periodicals, which would include SACS object codes 4100 and 4200. So what are we going to do? How are we going to collect this? So we don't want to create another application for everybody else to log into. What we would like to do is modify the ESSA PPE application. And we have some kind of designs that we're looking at right now. Nothing's been finalized, but generally what we're going to do is create just another page that would show your different schools on there, and then an area. So, next year, when you open up the ESSA PPE application, you should see an SLFS component to it, and you'll see a list of your schools, and then you'll see, your different functions there that you'll need to complete. And that, I think it should be as simple as that. I hope that it's nothing too difficult. We also want to be able to have the capability of uploading that data into the application like you can now with the ESSA PPE. But but our technology department is going to have to think that part out. Like I said earlier, we will be sending out a letter to all of the LEAs, kind of outlining this requirement and the different timelines and included and excluded expenditures and such. And then also we've created a web page that should be going live hopefully soon. The web page will have this presentation on it. We'll have the crosswalk on it. Just different types of things that should hopefully help for you to make these calculations. And then so here's some of the frequently asked questions that we anticipate we're going to get. So when do you have to meet it for the SLFS requirement for fiscal year 22? So, like we said, for, prior fiscal year reporting 22-23, we are going to use the ESSA PPE data. And then with fiscal year 23-24 information is when you would need to do your instruction function reporting, and then after that you'll need to include all 4 of the functions that they're requiring plus the 3 exhibits. So I know that this may be new to some of you. I know we've talked about this a little bit through the SACS forum. So if you do have questions, please feel free to reach out to us at sacsinfo@cde.ca.gov. I do want to try to keep the SLFS questions separate from the ESSA PPE questions. That's why we just want to throw them all over to SACS-Info. We do have a consultant that will be primarily charged with the SLFS. So let me see if there's any questions real quick. So nothing with the current per pupil expenditure reporting is changing. That's correct. So with the ESSA PPE, nothing changes there. It's the same as it's been for the last, what are we in year 4 now? The last few years, nothing there is changing. Your included expenditures are the same. Your excluded expenditures are the same. Regarding the new report, charters are not required to use SACS. Most administrative time cost pulls money away from the students. So true, charters are not required to use SACS. They will still need to report this function to us. So we do believe that charters could still identify what their salary amounts are at a function level. When is the survey due? So for this current year, March 1st is going to be our due date. And March 1st is just kind of the general deadline we have for the ESSA PPE. But that March 1st will also include the SLFS in the coming years. Who at the school level is responsible to report the data? Well, that's a good question. I don't know if anyone at the school level is primarily responsible. I would think that somebody at your district is responsible for the accounting of all of your schools, and they are my thought is that they should be, responsible for reporting this information. We're not asking for every single principal to submit this information. So the district will most likely be providing us this information. Generally, it's the CBOs that we send the access codes to provide it. Let's see, can you show the slide of what to exclude again? So for the SLFS, the only item that you're really excluding is adult education. And I think that is all that we have for questions. I do have 2 hands raised, so they were the same as the last 2, so I'm not sure if there's maybe a new questions. So let me start with Joanna. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Are you there? I can't hear you if you are.
I think she lowered her hand.
Oh, okay. Diane. Okay. And Roxanne, if you have a question. Okay. Kimberly.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I typed it in the chat, but or the Q&A. But so I know how you're stating that a lot of this info we already have. That's true to a certain degree because we pull reports and or for example, for myself, I do all those exclusions when I pull those reports out of QCC. But even though we have those, I don't put them into Excel or anything. I actually keep, hard copies of the reports and then I file them electronically and I go by that. So they still will need to be pulled differently. So will there be another letter for the SLFS that outlines the exact criterias like the exclusions, the functions, the object codes, et cetera, so that I can continue to do it that way for now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And actually, when we post this presentation, the crosswalk that you saw on this slide deck is the exact crosswalk that we'll have posted on our webpage.
Okay, yeah, because I've never done the uploading into the portal for the PPE. Again, I actually keep a different Excel spreadsheet that is my actual documentation, and then I take from there and enter it manually. So, okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Jawad.
Hey, hi there. So thanks for taking my call.
Yeah.
This is regarding the ASA PPE question regarding this cumulative data account because we've been using the before CalPad number, but it's no more to use. So currently it is updated in our website. Is that we are supposed to use it or somewhere else I can get it to update that? Because it seems to be not correct to me what is currently there in the web school side.
Right. So I'll kind of explain a little bit more about the application. So when we produce the access codes for all of the LEAs, the day we do that, whatever is in the and my apology, I am the furthest away from a computer programmer that somebody would know, but the day we start that process, whatever is the data that our technology department has in the system is what gets produced and saved into the application.
Mm-hmm.
So the data that you're seeing is most likely not correct. We're trying to update that. So it's we need to know what use your census day enrollment figures. That's what you should be using. We're going to try to update the application. We're talking about maybe next year starting the process a little later on the application so that maybe we can try to grab a better amount. But in years past, this wasn't much of an issue because we always said you can either use ADA or you can use enrollment because the feds didn't have, they allowed everybody at a local level on what to do. But because of the SLFS, we now need to narrow that down and we need to be more consistent. So we're going to use the census day enrollment figure as the membership count. So I hope that helps. I know it's confusing. I know it's frustrating, and I do apologize.
No, sorry, just to add on that. So what I'm going to do now for 22-23, should I send the email to and ask, this is the information I have based on the CalPad, this is in the system. So what is the correct number so I can update? So how do I update my side?
So if you need to make a revision to your calculation that you've already sent us,
No,
send
we
an
didn't send it.
email.
I didn't submit it yet. I just
Okay.
need the student count number before I'm submitting. So I just wanted to make sure, because it's one of the school site on particularly census day, the student was not there. But during the year, the student was there and we were the expenses. So we are a county office of education, not the regular school. So we have different scenario.
Mhm.
So sometimes students are there, couple of there, sometimes census day, no one is there. So what number should we put there? Because throughout the year, we have the student.
Right. We're going to use the census day enrollment figure. Can you email us your
Yeah.
email us
Yes.
to the SLPPE so that we can work with you? I just want to make sure, because I know in the counties it's different because you're serving a different
Correct.
student population. Let's do that, and we can work with you on that if there's any confusion.
Correct. Yeah. So I will send it to, so I should send ppe.cde. Okay.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your help.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. Another email for SLFS report questions. Please send those to the email that's on the slide deck now to saxinfo@cde.ca.gov. Census day enrollment figures for 23-24. So what we're doing now is we're doing the collection for the 22-23 fiscal year. So you're going to want to use your census day enrollment for fiscal year 22-23. And then next year, when we use the 23-24, then you would use census day enrollment for fiscal year 23-24. So if you do have to update your figures in the system, you can send an email to esappe@cde.ca.gov and ask for your submission to be opened back up. We can open that up for you without a problem. And then you can go back and make any changes you need to do it, recertify it, save it, and close it, and you'll be good. Okay. Will there be additional training on the changes for next year, either in person or Zoom? Most likely not in person. We'll probably continue with Zoom, but we are talking about doing another webinar that goes maybe a little further into the weeds for SLFS. So any questions that you may have on that, let us know, or whatever additional information you think you may know, let us know, and we can build a presentation that will help identify some of that. We will be sharing this recording. If you had a question that we didn't get to, if you could please just email us at one of the two websites, depending on if your question was SFLS related or SFPPE related, that would be great. I know that generally the questions are probably right now going to be based on enrollment, but we can try to get back to everybody on those if they have anything. So with that, I want to say thank you to everybody, and I hope you have a great day. And we should have this posted on the website, I think within the next day or so. So I hope it's helpful. All right, thank you, everyone.